to the inaugural Backstage Fest. All week, we've been featuring conversations from creators and actors of the buzziest TV series of the year. And this panel is called Spotlighting AAPI Performers Call for Hollywood Equity in honor of May, AAPI Pacific Heritage Month. Before we start, I'm going to introduce all of our panelists in case you don't know who they are, which you should. First up is Chung, who can be seen in HBO's SAG-nominated series Lovecraft Country, where she received critical acclaim for her role as Korean nurse Ji. Jamie can next be seen in The Misfits opposite Pierce Brosnan, releasing June 11th, and she will also star in the Apple TV series Mr. Corman and the reboot of Dexter.
Oh, hi, it's Jamie.
And next,
busy.
Okay, next is Olivia Leong, who currently stars on the CW's hit series Kung Fu, where she plays a lead character, Nikki Shen.
No, she's the star.
The star.
And the show has been renewed for a second season. Prior to Kung Fu, Olivia starred on Legacies, also on the CW. Next is Alice Lee, who is a series regular on NBC's Zoey Extraordinary Playlist, where she plays Emily Kang. Before that, she was also a series regular opposite Rachel Bilson on ABC's Take Two. And she will also appear opposite Julian Bell in Paul Downs' Colazzo's, I cannot pronounce his name, I'm sorry, his upcoming film, Brittany Runs a Marathon, which is premiering this year at Sundance.
Oh, it already premiered.
I watched it. It's so fantastic.
Oh, is it? Oh, I want to see.
Can't wait to see it.
Oh my God, we love queens that stand each other. Okay, our next panelist is Christina Chang, who is currently a series regular on The Good Doctor on NBC, where she plays Dr. Audrey Leam, Chief of Surgery. She also played recurring roles in Nashville, Desperate Housewives, and Private Practice. Our final panelist is Jessie Mei Lee, who stars as Alina Starkov in the Netflix fantasy series Shadow and Bone. She also appeared in the 2019 West End production of All About Eve, and will next appear in Edgar Wright's upcoming horror film Last Night in Soho.
Just a tiny part. Just a tiny
No tiny parts.
When do you die? Oh, can you tell us if you die in that film?
About Last Night in Soho?
Yeah, because it's a horror film.
I'm zipped.
Away. I'm gonna watch her, but I don't want to see her die.
No. It's like we all know what happens to Asians in horror films, you know. I'm just like,
yeah, no, not this time. We're safe.
Well, first, I have a question for the entire group, which is considering the historic lack of AAPI representation in film and TV, what inspired you to pursue a career in acting?
For the love of storytelling. You know, I think it's just that, like, going into it, you knew it was going to be an uphill battle, and it still is, you know, after 13 years in this business, over 13 years, and it's constant. You know, you're always fighting for your perspective. You're always fighting for authentic roles. You're always fighting for, you know, like there's not a lot of characters, I think, for ethnic actors, and if anything, we're always kind of fighting for the same role still. Yeah, it's for the storytelling, because when you get that great story, it's so rewarding, right?
Yeah,
I think when I first started out, lots of people, you know, well-meaning people, you know, saying you're gonna have a hard time, you know, not only are you like non-white, but you're also mixed, and people don't really think you look Asian, but you don't look white enough. And I had a lot of that. And I think what kind of then made me want to actually do it was mainly just the fact that I don't think I like people saying no. So I was like, hang on, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I think we need a bit of that, like, you know, don't let people tell you can't do something. So I wanted a challenge, and yeah, it seems to have worked out, and all these lovely ladies as well.
Yeah, I feel like no, you go.
No, you go, Olivia.
Oh, okay.
You go.
Okay, if you say so. I feel like I wasn't made aware of the lack until I started pursuing this career, because, you know, as a kid who loved the Disney Channel and would watch all of these kids having fun on screen, I didn't see why I couldn't also be part of that. And so the choice to go into this is, like Jamie said, storytelling and just a love for it, and it's fun. And it wasn't until I was in the thick of it that I was made aware of how Asian I am and how that there's not a lot of space for me. And it's changing, but yeah, I don't think growing up and dreaming about this, I felt hindered by the lack of representation I saw.
I'm kind of with Olivia too. Like when I started, I don't think I really registered. I just loved it. I loved performing. I knew I loved singing and acting. I also grew up on a lot of Korean dramas and like K-pop. So I was actually watching like Asian people doing their thing, but it was in Korea. But then, you know, when I started here, obviously, yeah, I didn't really know, oh, there aren't a lot of Asian people on screen. Like it didn't register to me, but obviously as I was in it, I was like, oh, okay, I'm a stereotype. Okay, I'm a token. Okay, but like I was like, well, F it, I still got to do it. But yeah, it's a lot better now, obviously. But yeah, I just started because I loved it.
Are we all in? Okay. I'm sort of, I think I started, further back. I'm a little bit older than all of you. And for sure, when I started, I mean, I was in the same audition room with the same 7 women, and we ranged in age by like 20 years, but they were like, hey, let's just have you all audition for the same role. I grew up in Taiwan, so I, like Alice, I don't know where you grew up, Alice, but I too did not grow up understanding that I was an anomaly because I grew up in Taiwan. If anything, it was like, well, you're kind of Caucasian. That's weird. So then I came to the States, and obviously that's when it all started to dawn on me. And I think, like Jamie, it was the love of storytelling. It started with dance, and then it just moved into theater, really, is where my love began with acting, was in theater. Yeah.
Yeah,
Storytelling. Yeah.
Christina and Olivia, I believe you both have a dance background.
Yes,
Oh.
that's where my mom let me perform, and she would not let me be an actor. She's fine now, but it was a big no.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, Alice, I love what you said about like just effort. I'm going to do this anyway. It kind of leads me to my next question, which was like a recent USC study found that Asians continue to be underrepresented in film, and that stereotypes of Asians are still common, especially the hypersexualization of Asian women. And so, can you all talk about, like, of course, you faced these hurdles in your career, but how did you overcome them?
The the hurdle of being hypersexualized, or what's the specific question?
Stereotyped and, you know, be seen as invisible, seen as a monolith, that kind of thing.
I'll just lead by saying, I don't know if it's overcome yet. Do you know what I mean? We're actually all still very much in the process of overcoming stereotypes, right? Quote unquote. So it's still in progress, but yeah, we can share stories, I think, about how we handle the stereotypes, or if you want to use the word defy or align with. Yeah,
I feel
that's
like
my initial thought.
For me now, I've definitely gone through a journey of like speaking up more when I feel like something is weird, you know, like in the past, I would just be like, yeah, sure, that joke flies, or yeah, whatever. But now, I don't know, it's still kind of scary, but I'm like, actually, I don't think this is good. And then knowing that my opinion matters, like that makes a difference now. But before, when those things were happening, I just kind of like went with it, you know? And obviously I have some guilt with that, but now I feel like because there's been so much solidarity and just everyone vocalizing how they've been feeling, just knowing that I wasn't crazy and that I'm not alone, I think that helps a lot going forward with other projects as well.
I think it's also important to ask for full transparency, like who's in the writer's room, you know, who's representing us, who's telling our stories, right? And now that we're coming from a place of wanting more authentic stories, you know, I think we're in quite a unique position, but I do feel like the tides are slowly changing because now we see more people in the writers' room that look like us, that are telling our stories, versus, you know, even just last year, it's, you know, white men who are trying to tell our perspective and our stories. And if they're willing to collaborate, that's great. But I still find myself, you know, like running into roadblocks for people who are holding on to the old ways and not interested in hearing my perspective, which is so frustrating because it's 2021, you know? And so you just don't know what you're going to get. But I think you have to be really careful with who you, I think, work with in terms of who's telling the story, you know? And are they willing to collaborate? Are they willing to listen to you? Do they value your opinion? And I think it's important to take those meetings, you know, after they like your audition and whatnot, to make sure that there's a creative, safe place, because yeah, that's the only way to change, you know, how people perceive Asian women in this industry, right?
I think it's
Agreed. And then I just have a quick, I guess, question to throw out there that sort of piggybacks Jamie's idea there, which I wholeheartedly agree with. What happens when you get to that point where you're able to have that conversation with the creators and the writers, and you go, well, what's the priority at this stage, at this climate? And I think the answer is probably that it's personal. It's dependent, case dependent, you know, but, you know, do you not take that role, or because they're not aligned necessarily and they're all white men writing your story, or do you take that role and go, well, at least I'm on the screen and younger women will come up seeing that? I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I wholeheartedly agree with Jamie, but I'm also like, what happens while we're still sort of at this place where we're trying to navigate that, you know?
I think there is such a there's a line, isn't there, like between what is okay and what isn't, and it's trying to draw that line is the different thing. You know, I remember starting out and I had a guy who wanted to be my commercials agent, and he used to say, you know, and I had like, you know, I was working several jobs and I didn't have much money and I was desperate to do anything, any kind of experience. And he would put me up again and again and again for roles where like it was like, we need a Japanese speaking person, or we need someone who's Korean or whatever, and like very specific, not just East Asian or mixed race. It was always like a specific race, and I was like, or a specific country. And I was saying to him, I'm not Korean, like I don't speak Mandarin either, like I don't even really speak Cantonese, like, and I kept saying these things to him, and he just kept saying like, oh no, but you look fine, yes, you look the part. And after a while, because I was so new to everything, I kind of thought, okay, I'll let you put me up for this, but it's stupid because I'm not that thing. And I just realized that this guy, like, he let slip once that he didn't have anyone who looked like me on his books. And I realized, like, okay, like, your intentions here are you want to make money, that's fine, obviously, but you have not got my best interest at heart, and I'm just ticking a box for you. So I was like, I don't want to work with you anymore. And then obviously, you know, things worked out. But it's really hard because when you're in a position where you're starting out maybe, or you know, money is tight and there is a role that's offered to you that maybe it's not entirely what you want to do, or it's not, you know, written in a way that's authentic, it is obviously, it's really difficult to, you know, you're so conflicted. And I guess in those situations, the best thing is, you know, to be able, like, have a team and writers who are open to hearing your side of things. That's, you know, in my experience, right?
Yeah.
Actually, this goes back to what Christina was saying earlier about like working on specific roles to develop them. And this question is for Christina, Olivia, and Jamie. Can you all talk about your respective roles in Lovecraft Country and Kung Fu and the Good Doctor? Because I feel like those roles are like could have gone awry in a very different way with in a more insensitive direction. And so can you talk about making like the ways you made sure that your characters went beyond like the stereotypical portrayals of those tropes and were more human?
Olivia.
For my character and my role, that work was done before the scripts got to me. Like, I have a Korean American showrunner, and we
Awesome.
have a diverse writers room, and she's also like a boss bitch. She's a woman, and so having that representation on the back end creates the trickle down effect that I think we're all hoping for, because
Yeah.
you know there are a lot of quote unquote stereotypes on my show. You know, my sister's a tech genius, I'm a kung fu master, my brother's a med student, my mom's a tiger mom, but you know, I don't think that any of those things are bad, because that's very much my experience as an Asian kid in America. My mom was a
That's right.
tiger mom. She wanted me to be a lawyer. Like, none of those things are bad. It's just when those are the only identifiers of who we are. But, you know, because we have these POC behind the scenes creating these stories for us, these are full human beings, full characters. And yeah, to just have Asian Americans at an executive level starts to create that change. And so I feel lucky that I didn't have to necessarily, you know, fight for authenticity or fight for my character to be three-dimensional, but it happened for me, and I feel very, very lucky. Like, I won the lottery in that sense.
That's fantastic. I play a doctor, which I think, what's that?
A great one, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what I love about it is that she's the chief of surgery. Oh, sorry, what?
Sorry, I was just complimenting you.
No, I missed it. Sorry. I was just going to say, it's so rare that a woman gets to play chief of surgery. I mean, that's really only represents 19% of North American statistics anyway, women being in like heads of department and chief of surgery. And so I love that the writers did that. And also I hear you on the, you know, it is a stereotype for a reason. I mean, you know, there are tiger moms that are Asian, and there are lots of doctors that are Asian. So I don't have a problem, obviously, playing a smart woman who's the chief of surgery. But interestingly, and this may tangent to another topic you wanted to hit later, but we actually don't ever discuss my ethnicity. It is not part of, I mean, it's obviously part of who Dr. Lim is because it's the way she looks, but we don't address it. And there's something cool about that because she's just integrated into the fabric of the show and is a doctor like everybody else. I think her being a woman is probably more acknowledged in terms of being, you know, what kind of respect does she get in this position, and would there be more respect if she were a white male and older and all of that. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But I also wonder if we shouldn't talk about that too, you know, so I throw that out to you ladies because I don't know on your shows or in past shows and movies, you know, how important that is to you for that to be addressed.
Our show, my entire episode takes place in Korea during the Korean War, so it's very specific, and it's important to highlight all of the, you know, not only racial, but yeah, I mean, mostly racial situations, because, you know, we're talking about a Korean Kamiho, you know, a Korean woman, and a Black soldier. So these are two different perspectives that we haven't seen before about the Korean War, which I found really interesting. You know, because, you know, I mean, and I asked my parents, because they lived through the Korean War, like what it was like to, you know, grow up during the war, but also to be a woman during those times. Like what was expected of you? What kind of sacrifice was expected of you? And this is all cultural things, right? So I thought that was really, really fascinating. And yes, this Kamiho is sexualized, but she knows exactly because her whole humanity comes from other people's experiences, right? She's down to like 99, basically she has sex with men and then takes their souls and, you know, kind of digests all of their experiences, and that's her only human experience, right? Until she comes to her own and she meets Atticus, this American Black soldier, and falls in love. But her perspective of humanity is all through films. It's Judy Garland films. you know, a white lady living in the South, you know, and so it's, yeah, I think it's important to take control of the perspective, but also she, you know, she has total control over sexuality, you know, and in fact she sucks the life out of these men. So that's already kind of like a stereotype flipped on its head. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
It's so interesting, like how,
I mean, it sounds really strange just saying it out loud if you haven't watched the show.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Maybe just catch an episode and you'll get it.
Eat them up. Eat them up.
It's the details, the nuance, you know what I mean, that makes
The
it
details of the tentacles.
totally.
Well, yeah. Anyways.
Totally.
Jessie, you're going to say something?
well, I know, I was just thinking, like, because you know what you three have just said is really interesting, because you know, so totally right that these, you know, stereotypes exist, but the reason they feel like stereotypes is because it is all that you see. Like, you don't look at, you know, white male actors, say, and think, oh, all of them are always playing, I don't know, soldiers.
Hero?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, but like, you know, imagine if it was like, oh, always playing like the soldier or something. But they don't say that because they have such a wide range of roles. And that's the thing. I think if there were just more, you know, roles for people who are non-white, like, then the stereotypes would still be there, but they would feel natural how they actually are.
Well, it just wouldn't stand out.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
also given the time to kind of explore and like let this character play out and see all the different colors and variants versus playing, you know, a 6-7 string on a show. You know what I mean? Like, and that's fine too, but like at least give the details of the story to women that look like us. That's the thing. I feel like everyone on this panel has had a great experience and finally had, you know, some time to shine and, you know, really get deep into the nuances of a character versus, like, you know, serving a story in a different way, right?
I also feel like stereotypes, like the reason, again, like we were all saying, it's like, it's because it's seen or portrayed in this negative way. It's like, oh, like, because yeah, like that's a reality. A lot of Asian people are doctors or, you know, all this stuff, but it's because of this perspective, the Eurocentric perspective, where it's like, oh, that's, well, of course. So I think it's just a mindset too. It's like, that's not a bad thing, but it's just the way that people view it. And so that's how they write the stories. And then, so yeah, I feel like it's just shift in thinking. That's what should be happening.
It's like such a catch-22, isn't it? Because it's like people write these things because they see these things, so then they write these things so they see these things. It's like that snake that's eating its own tail. I can't remember the name.
That's when, yeah, like to have Asian executives and like if they're the ones, like I feel like there's so many roles where I go in for things and it's like open ethnicity or something like that, you know, and it gets tricky, but it's like if it's something Asian, especially when it's like, oh, differentiating between Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Southeast Asian, it's like I find sometimes the people up there are making these decisions, but they're not Asian. So it's like, if it was Asian leaders making these decisions about, okay, like how should we
be more specific? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's because they're not there. The Asian, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, that totally reminds me of an experience I had in 1855 when I was in New York auditioning for a show called The Golden Child. And the direction I was given, not by David Henry Hwang, who was the playwright, but the Caucasian director was, he interrupted my audition and said, can you just do it more
oh, don't say it.
Asian?
Oh,
and I was like, listen to me. If I had then what I have now, and I think that this is I sound like a grandma, but I think that this is the benefit of these conversations happening in this for your generation. But I mean, you know, back then I felt like, oh my God, what I wanted to do was say, no. And I know that this is an amazing opportunity, but you stink. So I'm going to go. That was a terrible direction. And I won't want to work with you, even if you wanted to work with me, which he did not. So, you know, but I looked at him and I I don't understand that direction.
Mhm.
I may have been too tall to play the role. I'm mixed race, so maybe I wasn't the right look to begin with. I had really short hair, which was also not Asian at the time, you know? So everything about me was like, no, for this. And at the same time, like, he could not have come up with another direction. It was just, can you do this more Asian? And I was like, no. And then I just kept doing it. And he was like, okay, no, thank you. And that was the end of that. And it was a terrible audition experience, but it spoke to what you were talking about, you know, where it's like, if we don't have the people in the room that are doing the hiring, whether it's the showrunners or the EPs or the studio execs, if they don't have an understanding or at least a sensitivity and an interest in understanding and learning, then it's really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's, yeah, I mean, one step at a time, you know.
Yeah.
I just think like some of these things, like they belong in the past, but they actually don't. Like, I think it was 2 years ago, I went to see a play on the West End, and it wasn't a very good play out there, but some of the actors were multi-rolling, and there was this one woman, and she was a white lady, maybe her 50s or something, and she was playing this role, and then later on she comes back on screen playing a Vietnamese woman, and on stage, and I went, oh my god. And the worst part of it, like, actually, you know, when you're just so angry that you kind of feel like you're going to cry, and I really wasn't expecting to feel like this, but the whole audience started laughing at like this racist accent she was doing. It was so appalling. And
they were laughing because it was ridiculous.
They were laughing because of, like, the joke was that this was like an angry Vietnamese shop owner, and she was doing a very, very like over the top accent, and this was a white woman, and this was 2 years ago, maybe 3, and I just thought, like, I thought this was something that happened a long time ago, that people would be embarrassed. I thought I would look around the audience and see embarrassment, but it was no, like, you know, it was mainly older people in the audience, and they were, and I just wanted to get up and leave, but we were right in the middle, and I just thought, I'm just fucking sit through this. But
yeah,
you think that doesn't happen anymore.
I'm waiting for the like Victoria like punchline here. I keep, you know what I mean? Like, you're right. 2 years ago, you'd think that, like, well, the joke is that she's like doing this and it's terrible.
Yeah.
That she's making fun of people who do that, you know.
It wasn't. It was just straight up, like, they just didn't want to cut. It was a small like segment of the play that they obviously just thought, well, we'll just multi-roll it, and it's only like a few lines or whatever. Rather than actually,
like, was there any Asian people in the show? Like,
no.
Like, yeah, so it's like, I don't know what the show was, but it's like, why can't you have just had an Asian person who played another character and then they could do that? I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, it's wild.
It was just I was just so angry about it. Sorry.
I do think that, like, you know, as one does, I mean, I know early on in my career too, like, I've stumbled on some questionable roles. But yeah, it begs the question of, like, do I continue? Is any representation better than no representation? Like, is it okay?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think these are things that we've, as a society, like, stumbled along, you know, and we're figuring it out. But it's better to figure it out and make it right than, like, you know, stick to the old ways, because there's no turning back now. But yeah, it's like, it's a question of, like, do we eat, and are we able to live, or do we take these questionable roles? And I do think that there is a bit more consciousness, you know, creatively overall, in the right direction. But
for sure. I think it's totally come a long way since, you know, 20 plus years ago.
Even
but
just like,
sort of like
2 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, enduring change does take one step at a time. You know what I mean? I mean, like, it's real enduring change.
Yeah, I mean,
and it feels,
what was the Hawaiian movie where Emma Stone played, and they justified hiring her and saying, like, you're half Asian, and she's
not.
Hello.
Yeah. And it takes place in Hawaii, and she's a native of Hawaiian. It's like, I don't know.
I thought they had changed it so she wasn't Hawaiian. No, she was supposed to be like half.
She was originally supposed to be half Hawaiian. Yeah, the character.
She was still half Hawaiian in the movie.
She is. Like, Emma Stone is considered half Hawaiian in the movie.
Yeah.
I did not watch it.
Yeah, but I mean, not so much the backlash, but just like, I didn't believe it, you know what I mean? I think the creators and I think the studio heads were like, yeah, maybe that was a bad idea. Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't know if y'all remember a couple years ago, Doctor Strange, the Marvel movie, they cast Tilda Swinton as a character that was originally Asian in the comics, and they got huge backlash for it. And then recently, the director said, we probably should have casted an Asian.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah. And there's
now, yeah, you think? It always happens after the backlash. And I just, like we all talked about, I feel like it's 2021. I still feel like I'm reading stuff that I'm not getting auditions, and I'm like, wait, you know? And you're like, I just thought, yeah, you just hope that they think about this beforehand, not afterwards when everyone's giving them shit, you know?
Well, it's like getting caught, you know, on something. You get in trouble, then you're like, dude, sorry. But yeah, I think people are going with what's familiar to them. And as we've been saying, if the people in the positions of hiring are familiar with people that look like them, then this just, yeah. So we just need more writers and showrunners and creators of the rainbow.
Yep.
Which is happening. It's definitely, right? Yeah.
It's a slow burn. I mean, if you saw the breakdown of the study, USC study, it breaks down literally like people in front of the camera and behind the camera, and you're like, yeah, we have a long way to go. I'm more of the
well, and it's interesting too, right? And if we want to talk about, okay, so how do we get in that position? You know, whether or not those of us on this panel are interested in doing that, which I am, but that in and of itself is really hard for me. So, you know, I have a show that I have created, and I have a girlfriend that I'm doing it with who's also half mixed race, you know, Asian, Caucasian like myself. And you would think right now, hashtag right now would be a great opportunity. And it's really hard to get, you know, we're getting indoors and, you know, into studios or into production companies and being able to talk about it, but getting it actually made is like a totally different thing. So, you know, it's sort of that circuitous thing again of, well, how do I get into a position of creating something and hiring people that look like me on all fronts if I can't get through that door, you know?
I think it's easy. It's seeing the value in our stories, and it's supporting other. I mean, the only way these shows are going to get made is if people actually come watch and support, right? So yeah, tune in. I just feel like we continue the support. You know, every time I see one of your shows on screen, like blasting it on my stories, like, yes, check this out. It's supporting other, you know.
Oh, for sure. But I'm saying if you want to create your own content is what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean?
I think you just go for it. But I do think that people are starting.
You mean just make it yourself?
Well, I mean, certainly pitch, like think of ideas, you know, gobble up, you know, rights to stories, you know, just I do think that there's like an appetite for our stories. And so I think we keep pushing the rock up the hill, you know.
Oh, I mean, we just keep pitching and pitching and pitching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like asking the community to like fucking support us. Excuse my
rally.
Watch our shows, you know? Like I have you know, and just, you know, exactly. We support. Thank you, Erica.
And this actually, since we're talking about whitewashing, I actually wanted to ask Jessie this, which is Jessie's character on Shadow and Bone was originally white in the books, or non-racially specific, which people assume are white usually. Mm-hmm. And so, Jessie, can you talk about that experience of like putting a racial element within the story, and also like making it clear that you don't have to, white doesn't need to be the default when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing, because this role was, it was written for a white person. So it was just really nice. I felt like what they did was they took this role, you know, this chosen one, kind of, you know, almost like a stereotypical YA protagonist, and thought like, how best can we tell this story and this journey that she goes on? And one of the writers in our writers' room is Korean American, Christina Strain. Brilliant. And they decided to make Alina mixed race because a lot of the themes I was talking about in the show, it's about identity, it's about finding out where you belong. And like, what better way in some ways than to have a character who is literally torn between two worlds, and she has to, that her whole, you know, goal is to essentially save this country, which has only ever just othered her and been racist to her because of how she looks. And I thought that was really, really cool that they did that. And yeah, I mean, it's another thing about the show that I liked, and this is like a subject I'd love to hear what you guys think, but you know, when I first got the audition through, I saw, oh, like a mixed race fantasy lead, this is sick. But then I was like, oh wait, she wasn't Asian in the books, like what's that about? And you know, we all get that kind of thing of like, oh, here we go, like it's just ticking a box, right? But then like in the sides, in the audition script, it was saying, you know, they were talking about Alina's talking about her eyes and talking about her heritage, and I thought, okay, like they're not shying away from the fact that they have changed this. It wasn't just like, hey, look, this is Alina now and Alina is mixed race, cool, that would have been great. But they were actually saying, look, this is a fantasy world, but it's a country at war, and you know, between these two countries. And I like the fact that they were talking about it, and it meant that like I was able to give Alina, who was, you know, this well-written character with loads going on, like she's got so many flaws and so many ideas, and you know, and have this like real authentic, you know, complex inner world that we all have. And that was amazing. And I really liked that they didn't shy away from the racism, especially now when I have so many times in my life had people say, yeah, but people aren't racist to Asians, like come on. That has been said to me so many times. And the fact that, you know, again, it's a fantasy race, it's a whatever, but you know, Alina faces racism, and I think it's actually, depending on like how you feel about that, it's still got people talking about it. And I think that's really important as well, because honestly, so many people deny that it's even a thing, which is truly shocking to me. And I hope nowadays, especially seeing what's going on in the world, people understand that no, Asian people face a lot of racism. You just might not have been paying attention.
I'm like wondering, because I think Jessie and Christina, you both have brought this up separately, which was like, when is a story, should all stories be racially specific, or can we just play characters and not talk about race? And it makes me think of like Alice in Zoeys Extraordinary Playlist this season. You have a storyline where you have postpartum depression and also sing through it, which is amazing. I love musical theater. So can you talk a little bit, or the three of you, can you talk a little bit about like, what do you prefer when it comes to storytelling that features?
Like for me, it definitely is just context. You know, I think like I talked about before, there are lots of times. So for Zoeys, I was also not written as any ethnicity, and I just happened to play her, which is amazing. And we don't like delve into her being Asian or Korean. I'm pretty sure she's Korean, Emily Kang. But like her sister shows up in the second season, and so there's like another Asian woman in the scene. But also I feel like I think a lot of creators, when I see open ethnicity or something, it's a commitment, right? Like if your character is going to be Asian or Black or Latina, that's a part of their identity, and your stories will probably change. And that's a commitment to getting a writer's room that has people of that color in the room. And I think sometimes, creators are afraid of that. Like, oh, if the lead is open ethnicity, but we make her Asian, it's going to be an Asian story. So we don't want to do that. So that's when I'm like, it can't be just a passing thought. Don't just say open ethnicity and be like the best person, because there's more to it than that. If you pick someone of color, the story, it has to shape itself, you know? And I think I would love to see people commit more to that. But I do love that, this role was open, and we don't talk about me being Asian, but I mean, I'm Asian, so Emily's Asian, and that's part of her, and her postpartum is also, now it represents something for Asian women as well, because also Asian women, you know, with mental illnesses, we don't talk about that much in general. So I think that just naturally becomes a thing, you know?
That's right. So what's the question? What was the actual question?
When it comes to storytelling, do you prefer stories where you don't have to talk about race, or when it's integrated into the narrative?
I think there's value in both. And I think it's what I brought up earlier about, you know, I sort of like that we haven't, that it wasn't all, my character, it wasn't all about that. Do you know what I mean? And at the same time, I also said, much to what Alice just said, I look the way that I do. So that's just going to inform and inspire and shape, you know, certain things. Would I like for us to acknowledge it at some point during the series? Yeah, I would. I would love that. You know, but it's sort of I don't know who brought it up earlier in this conversation about how if there were just more, it was either out, well, I can't remember, that, you know, if there were more of us, we wouldn't just stand out as like the kung fu girl and the doctor and the sexy, you know, whatever it, you know. And so to that I say, well, if there was more of us, would we feel the need to talk about being Asian, right? I don't know, which is why I say I think there's value to both of these things, in my opinion, right now, currently is how I feel.
Yeah,
that may change.
I just think we need more stories, period. Like, I don't think we would be asking this question.
That's
had
right.
we have enough stories of both, of different kind of experiences. Like, I feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? And
For
now
sure.
what we're pushing out is like very specific to Asian cultures, or can we just make it about humanity? It's always about humanity stories, right?
Always.
But
Yep.
now if we had more of our stories and more people who look like us, then there wouldn't be a question of, you know, should it be one or another? Like, why can't we have it all?
And this is a question I want to ask Olivia and Jamie, which is Kung Fu and Lovecraft Country both talk about the relationship between the Black and the Asian community. And so why was it important in the world of the show to show this dynamic, especially because there's this popular perception that these two communities are at odds with each other?
Well, first of all, it's not by choice. You know, there are systems put in place that have our communities fighting for resources and are pitted against each other. And literally that's the systemic racism and white supremacy. I know everyone hates that word, but it's an evil thing, you know, where it's just, I mean, even today with the news cycles, I feel like there's false information out there, so that we, instead of coming together because we are so much stronger in numbers, we're pitted against each other. And it works because hate is a really powerful thing, unfortunately. But what I love about Lovecraft is it shows that, you know, even during a time during the Korean War, the troops were supposed to be desegregated, and yet they were segregated. You know, of course, they're the first ones out to fight the front lines. And then our story specifically showed how our otherness, you know, we were like, you know, how Blacks in America are felt like they don't even belong in their own country. And also Koreans during the Korean War were felt like second-class citizens, you know. Like, there's lots of jarring, you know, horrific similarities, but like in the end, it's like two people fall in love, you know, regardless of their race, and they want to make it work. You know, people find their place where they're sadly unwanted, but the solidarity is what is so important, because that's when great change happens, right? And then this all takes place before the civil rights movement, but you know, we're talking about like segregation in America during Jim Crow on our show. So there's some really tough subject matters, but you know, I think it highlights it in a way that it doesn't shun our history and our past, but it sees how we can grow from it. So.
Yeah. Our episode that spoke to Black Asian solidarity was really reflective of, I think, the now, which I don't think we knew how poignant it was going to be. And, you know, I just see now reflected in that episode. And when I think about what has happened with both of these communities in the last year, I myself, as an Asian American person, have become so much more empathetic to the Black and Brown experience, because for the first time in my life, I was afraid of getting hurt for the way that I look. And then it's so silly, but that's when it like hit me like, oh my gosh, Black and Brown people have felt this their entire lives.
And sometimes every day of their lives.
And every single day of their lives. And to pit these groups of people against each other is just like, what are we doing? Why would we do that? And I think it speaks to the systemic problem that Jamie already touched on. And like, what I love about what our episode did was it brought in that generational gap where my character was at odds with her mom, because her mom really subscribed to the systemic systems that were in place, and starting to break that down and starting to create a dialogue around that and start to bridge that. And so I hope that episode of our show opened up dialogue for other Asian Americans to speak with their parents and grandparents, to start to help them understand the Black and Brown experience.
And it totally starts at home, right?
Yeah.
Breaking those stereotypes, but also breaking, like, you know, if we're going to talk about, let's talk about it, like the anti-Blackness in Asian communities,
Yes.
you know, or like fearful, hurtful stereotypes. Yeah, the conversation definitely starts at home.
Yeah, it does. And I just hope that we start to talk with the older generation of Asian Americans or Asian people in America, so that we can, as minorities in this country, see that we share an experience and that there's power in
And I think just to pick
solidarity.
That Olivia, is we share similarities, but they're very different experiences, you know, and that needs to be respected as well. And not a lot of, you know, and like some people, and your personal experiences are very different and specific. So I just think the respect of knowing and understanding the history, but also understanding that like two struggles are not the same, and that's fine, but they are struggles, right? And
That's
we're not ranking pain or anything like that. Just have some respect to what they've experienced, and like how far, and the adversities are very different, and you know, their everyday battles are different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what
interesting. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, so Jessie, please.
No, I was just saying what you're saying about, you know, it starts in the home and everything, and that, like, yeah, that's really true. And but I think of like the people who don't have someone at home to give them guidance, and that's why, like, I'm just thinking about, you know, this group of people here, like people genuinely do form their worldview from what they're watching, like so much, especially young people, and that's like, they're the most vulnerable, they're the people who are starting to create these ideas and have opinions. And I think that's why, like, back to the representation thing, like, let's just say you don't know anyone in your day-to-day life who's Black or brown or Asian or whatever, like you are going to believe a stereotype that someone feeds you. But if you watch
that's the only thing you know. Yeah,
exactly. But then if you put on a show that you like, and there's a well-written character who you really like, just you like them, you understand, you sympathize with them, that actually can make all the difference. And some people might think, oh well, you know, but it's true. Like, I've genuinely met people who have changed their mind about things based on characters,
on what
like,
they watch. Yeah.
So that's why it's so important. It's not just about, like, you know, making people feel represented in that way. It's for the people who aren't part of the group that's being represented. It's important for them to see, like, normal human beings doing normal human being things, or fantastical magical human being things, whatever. But, like, you know, we're all human beings with very different, like you were saying, Jamie, like very different experiences and things. But when we can actually see them and get to know them intimately, that's when, like, real change happens.
Yep. You bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Like, people, like in media, you have to see, because when people don't know something, or it's not familiar, it just feels scary or foreign. But media, like Jessie said, it's so important, I feel like, because you now are in their homes, in their TV screens, you know, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that they, like, that stereotype wasn't real, you know? And like, that's why it's so important that we are representing, you know, Asians on screen, because it becomes familiar. And then people are like,
Yeah.
oh, you
It's
understand
humanizing,
them.
yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not like anecdotal actually either. There's a recent UCLA study that said audiences want more diversity because it helps them empathize with other people.
There you go, yeah.
Hello.
Oh.
The data backs it up.
Not
Okay,
rocket science. Yeah.
the Zoom room has questions and they want you all to answer them. So, what advice would you give to aspiring Asian actors who are just starting / beginning their career?
I'll go first, but I think it's kind of problematic, maybe. I just think like being on a set and understanding and experiencing what it's like, it's important. So I would suggest, I mean, I'm kind of old fashioned and I did it this way, which really sucked at times, but like just being an extra on a show, you know, understanding the ropes of what it's like to be on a set daily, but then also coming with it with a place of knowing and having value in your perspective and your story. Like that took me just until last year to realize, like, knowing my value. And I think it's so important that you know your value as a storyteller, regardless of the size of the role, like, you know, any of that. It's just important that you're there.
Say what Jamie's saying pretty much, like, especially me too, like kind of owning yourself. Like, I feel like a lot of Asians, you know, we just have experience trying to hide that part of us or feeling shame or whatever it is. But now it's like, you know what? Fully embrace your Asianness. Like, that's awesome. And that's what's going to make you special. I mean, that's what makes you unique. And we've been told that that's not good. But I'd say if you want to go for it in this industry, like, own that part of you and, you know, be proud of that. And the work will come. So, yeah.
Yes, and just in along the same lines, don't try to fit into whatever box you think that they have built for you, because fuck it. just go for it, and what's meant for you won't pass you, and all that other pillow stitching stuff. It's just go for it.
Yeah, I think along the same lines, like, you know, you guys saying, like, know your worth, like, know your worth. And if you're not happy with something, like, if, you know, you're up for a role that doesn't feel right, or it's making you feel uncomfortable or something, there are always other opportunities. And I think that's really important to remember, because, you know, rather than putting yourself in a situation that makes you uncomfortable, that, you know, isn't going to serve anyone at the end of the day, like, if you just think, hey, do you know what, I don't like the way this is written, I don't want to be a part of this project, walk away. Like, there will be other things. And I think knowing that and just remembering that is important, you know, to keep yourself safe, keep your well-being safe. So just know your worth and know that you can walk away from things, and there will always be other opportunities, even if it doesn't feel like that at the time.
Okay. I would say, as a gentle reminder to those that are coming up, and even those of us that are here, that there's a small part of us, even if it's very quiet and still, that knows that we are worthy. Because sitting here on this panel or watching it or coming up in this career, every time you go out for an audition or you submit for one or your agent submits you for one, you being in the game every single day means you know you're worth it, right? Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be doing that. So you already are standing in that. So know that and just expand in that, I guess.
And I think also it's like not a bad thing to have an opinion and to be outspoken. You know, I think quite often we're like shamed or we're labeled difficult, or, you know, and I just think when you hear that phrase about especially a woman in this industry, I think take it with a grain of salt, because it just means that we have an opinion, we think our opinion matters. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
This is the last question, and only because a lot of people have been asking this in the chat, and so I'm going to combine it actually. This is for Jessie and Christina because you're both HAPA, and so can you also speak on overcoming the you're not, XYZ enough for this role? And also Jessie specifically, you're also gender nonconforming, so if you can speak to that as well, that would be helpful to our listeners, viewers.
Christina, do you want to go first?
Oh. What was the actual question? Sorry.
How did you overcome being the line of you're not XYZ enough?
How do you overcome that? I don't know what there is to overcome. You know what I mean? Like, I just have grown up looking the way that I do. And so every time I think it's more about how do you receive that information more than like overcoming it. And I think the way that I receive that is, well, that's just what makes me unique. Of course I've heard you're not white enough for this role. You're not Asian enough for this role. I have heard it for years and years and years. I will probably continue to hear that. And to that I say, yeah, but I'm good. And I really love what I'm good as in like good enough. And I really, really like working. I really enjoy acting. And I love working with other people. And so, I was told I couldn't do Shakespeare and I couldn't do all the word pieces because, because I'm not white. And that's just not true. I went on to do leading roles in Shakespeare companies. Do you know what I mean? And so every time you get to do something, there's evidence that that thing that person said isn't true. So I guess it's just about how you receive it. And you can take that in and then spit it right back out, I guess, and just keep going is sort of my current answer.
Totally. I love that because that's kind of where I'm at now, but I definitely wasn't in the past. Like, I think I found it really hard, and it's especially like being HAPA, and some people are really in touch with like both sides of their, culture, both heritage. And I really wasn't growing up. My dad is Chinese, but I grew up in the UK and like I didn't speak Cantonese and wasn't really in touch with my culture at all. So I think because of that every time someone said you're not Asian enough or you're too white or whatever, it would genuinely like upset me, because I was just like, well, what? I hate being like this. You're making it like I'm some mongrel, like a mutt who doesn't fit anywhere. And especially like, Deep, what you were saying about me identifying gender non-conforming, like, again, it's this thing of like, you're too girly for this, you're too, macho for that and all that kind of thing. And it's just kind of constantly being told what you are. And when you're young, especially, that is just like, you go, oh, okay, I guess so. But now it's very different. I think having found some success in my life and feeling much more like settled as a person, and I know who I am now, I do receive that information very differently. And even now, like with the show coming out, I don't look on social media anymore at comments, just because it, I'm sure you all know, like it can be horrendous. And a lot of comments basically saying that I was too white for this and I'm too, whatever. And I just think, imagine just a world where we just don't have to constantly talk about people's appearances. That would be great. Like, I would just really appreciate that. But I think just know, like, yeah, you may be in someone's idea who's probably got a very stereotypical like idea of what you should look like. If they think that, then they're wrong, because you look like you do, and that's it. You look the way you do, and that's that, and there's nothing can be done. And you are who you are. So I think that coming to that understanding, like Christina was saying, just like, you can think that, but this is my truth. I think that's really cool. And that's really like a good mindset to be in. And just allow yourself to know you. And that's all you can do.
It's grass is always greener, right? I look at every time I see a hop, I'm like, that's so lucky that you're the ambiguity of your race, you're able to play one or the other. And like coming up in this industry, I was like so jealous of that.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that honestly comes from a place of like lack of confidence, And so, yeah, it's a very insecure thing. And it's so much easier to like oh, well, they have it easier, or like, have those kind of thoughts. But, now seeing it now, it's like, it doesn't make you less Asian or less of anything else. Like culturally, like you probably are more Asian than me, you know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, I just think it comes from, I mean, a lot of, we did a lot of growing up, but it's just funny because you say that in your struggles, and I totally empathize, and like they're very unique, but I'm always like, oh, wouldn't it be so great, or don't you think that I'd have it a little bit easier if I was, if I was Hapa, or a bit more ambiguous than how I look. But yeah, but now, look, so proud of it, and there's a lane for everyone, and that's why I love seeing everyone shine, like on this panel. Like, you guys are killing it. Christina, I saw your episode on Good Doctor. I was like, whoa, she's a badass. She's really strong. Olivia, you're fucking lead of your own show. Alice, I can't wait to see that one episode that you were talking about. And Jessie, I mean, if people keep talking about Shadow and Bone, it's on my list, but like, I just love seeing people shine because every story is unique, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on this, because I love meeting all of you women. We've not met in person yet, but now that we've done this, I so look forward to just, chatting with you, meeting with you, continuing this conversation in another way. I feel so thankful. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Same.
Olivia, will you send me the picture, please, of
Yes.
from ages ago?
Oh,
That's
so cute.
I think that's so great. And yeah, it's just like, I had a similar fan moment when I got to work with, it's shocking, The Good Doctor. We had 3 Asian people on the show at one time.
At the same time, I know.
I was like, what? Oh, what's
That's
happening?
huge.
There's too many of us here.
Yeah.
But Tamlin Tomita was on the show, and I can't tell you how many times I saw her in audition rooms, and I was like, I can't talk to her, because I saw Joy Luck Club, and I mean, she just is a legend, and her and Ming Na and all the other ones, Rosalind. And then meeting her, and she's such a wonderful, sort of, I feel like they're sort of not the firsts, but kind of, right? That generation of women ahead of us. And I was like, oh my God, it was and she was so cool, and like, oh my God, that's so meet you. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you. And so I feel you, Olivia. That's like such a cool moment to be able to do this with Jamie. It's inspiring, and it's good.
Olivia pulls up a picture of
it's 2012, I think, and Jamie was in San Diego at a screening of her movie Eden, and my best friend and I were like, we're going because Jamie's gonna be there. And so we went, and she was just like mingling with everybody afterwards, and then I got a photo with her, and she was like, I like your shirt, and she was so sweet, and like, and it really stuck with me. And then Christina, what you were just talking about, it just, I love that our community is so supportive of each other, because it's so easy to see that there's one role for us, and then you're like, I need to take that bitch down in the audition room. But like, I've never felt that way from my fellow Asian actors when I'm in a room with everyone. It's just like, oh, thank goodness there's going to be a role for us. And if it's not mine, then it's yours. And then I'm lucky enough to be on a show that has a shit ton of Asians. Like, we have a token white guy, and everyone else is Asian. Like background actors, everything.
Also, Jamie, I remember watching you on Road Rules. That's what I saw you on.
A Real World.
A Real World? Was a Real World?
Crazy. Yeah, it was Real World. But it's like, I think I was like one of the first Asian women to be on that show and have that perspective. But the whole show is centered around seven strangers from different parts of the States with different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions, different upbringings. And it's like, how are they going to get, like, how can we get along? How do we overcome and just have an open dialogue of our differences and like come to a place where we meet and understand each other? Like, wouldn't it be so lovely if social media was like that?
It can be. Sometimes it is, right? We can just keep I don't know, trying to shape it and push it in that direction, move it in that direction.
And sorry, lastly, Olivia, what's the episode number so I can watch that you were talking about? Thank you. Okay, cool. Can't wait to watch it. Awesome.
I'm gonna watch this.
Can't wait to watch everybody continue
Yeah.
to flourish and shine.
Well, we are way over time.
Okay.
Oh,
Keep talking. We gotta stop the live stream.
Oh, we got cut off?
No, I think we're still. I think we're still streaming, but another panel.
we all froze.
Oh,
Oh
cool.
no.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having us.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
Yo. Thanks guys for tuning in.
Thank you.
Air
Can't wait to freaking work
Hugs.
with you guys.